So many prayer requests.
We'll find out in a little while how bad he is when we get the camera and see.
So, last week was a big chapter. It had so many different things in it. We talked about all the things that Jesus was doing on the Sabbath, and the Pharisees and whatnot trying to catch him doing something wrong on the Sabbath. We've seen Jesus goes up and prays, and then comes back and picks out all these crazy apostles to follow him, and 12, and how different they were. We had almost a Sermon on the Mount type of a thing. It was a sermon in the plain, and it was the blessings and the woes. And then we got the golden rule. I didn't mention the golden rule, but it's you treat others how you want to be treated, in other words. So we talked about that last week. It's a big chapter. Lots of stuff went on last week. We talked about that parable about having a log in your eye and helping get somebody a speck out of their eye. You got to get rid of your log. We talked about that. And we talked about good and bad fruit. And I bring up all these things because it goes into chapter 7, and it's going to be talking about a centurion man's faith. And verse 1 of chapter 7 of Luke. Is everybody there? Now, when he had ended all his sayings in the audience of the people, he entered into Capernaum, and a certain centurion's servant, who was dear unto him, was sick and was ready to die. A centurion. Anybody know what a centurion is? He's a Roman soldier, and he would have been one of the higher ups. It was a real honor to be a centurion, and he would have been over around 100 men, hence the name centurion, century 100. A centurion's over 100 men, and to become a centurion, you had to be a well-grounded person. You had to be smart. You wasn't real flying off at the whim. You thought about things, and you thought things clearly. That way you didn't get all your men killed. So if you was in battle, you would be a grounded person, not just ready to just go to fight. You would have strategy. You'd be smart.
That's equivalent of a 5-star general these days.
Yeah. It was a 5-star general, high-ranking general.
High rank.
So it was a very prestigious thing to be a centurion. And what's odd is, they belong to Rome. They're not Jews. They're not from this part of the place, and they work for Rome, and they are Roman most of the time. But every single time in the Bible, a centurion is talked about in a good way. He's in a good light every time. So centurions were always really, really smart and well respected and highly thought of people. But what's odd is it says that the servant who was dear to him was sick and ready to die. So back in these days, a servant, and the best I could understand, there was between 3 and 5 slaves to one person. So if there was one person, there was between 3 and 5 slaves. That's the weight of the population back then. And what they would do is, if a servant got sick, you would take inventory every year. If one of your slaves or your servants was not doing their job, you got rid of them. They were a tool. You just killed them, got rid of them, traded them for a flat screen TV, whatever. But you see this? He said it was dear to him. So that's something that sticks out. That's something that kind of tells you the characteristics of the centurion, that he's a good dude.
One man was talking about that one day, about the slave back then. And he said it was like us going out today and somebody that we didn't like, we trade them for a goat, then shot the goat. So that was about, he said that was about the same thing they done. They traded him off for something else and got him another.
I used to know a lot more about this. It was, I think, and you know, I messed up. 30 pieces of silver could buy a slave, and that's what Jesus was sold for. I said 20 last week. I don't know where that came from, but you know, 30 pieces of silver, you could buy a slave in these days. So, but they were just tools. It was a living tool. That's all it was to the Romans. So just keep that in mind when we get through the rest of the story. Verse 3, and when he heard of Jesus, he sent unto him the elders of the Jews, beseeching him that he would come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they besought him instantly, saying that he was worthy for whom he should do this. So, this centurion was he knew what was going on. He knew how to get things done he knew how things worked in the Jewish religion. Because Jews couldn't associate with Gentiles. And he said, what I'll do is go to the Jews and tell them to send for Jesus. And that way things can get done. And being a centurion, we talked about it a little bit last week, he was under Caesar, and his words were Caesar's words. So he very easily could have commanded Jesus to come to him, but he didn't. He went to the Jews, and then he asked the Jews to bring him to him. And I'm putting all this together because there's a big thought that goes right here, and you want to see how it works. And just take note, it says the Jews said, he is worthy for whom you should do this. The Jews are saying this is a worthy man, the centurion's a worthy man. And that just points back to the way they think. That goes back to your works is what's getting you where you're going. That just shows you the mindset they have. They're worthy. He's worthy. This man's worthy. And this is why he's worthy. 5, for he loveth our nation, and he hath built us a synagogue. So this Roman soldier has found, and it takes 10 Jewish men to build a synagogue. So he has found 10 Jewish men that want a synagogue, and he helps them build it for them, or has it built for them. So that's what's making him worthy. He's worthy, and he's recognized the Jewish God evidently, and knows that he is the God, and he only has like one God now. He's a God-fearer, is what it would have been called in these days. So that's why he's worthy. He's built a synagogue. Verse 6, then Jesus went with them, and when he was now not far from the house, the centurion sent his friends to him, saying unto him, Lord, trouble not thyself, for I am not worthy that thou shouldest enter under my roof. So the centurion, again, don't even want to see him, don't want to corrupt him, because he knows how it works. He don't want to get close to him, because he knows that he's a sinner. He's a Gentile, and he knows the way their religion works. He don't want to defile him, because you'll see in a minute, he knows that he's somebody just by the faith that he has in him. And you see the mentality that the centurion has. He says, I'm not worthy. Well, the guys a while ago were saying he's a worthy man. He built us a synagogue, but he's got this mentality that he's not worthy of even being in front of Jesus. That just goes, that's the difference between the legalistic Pharisees and scribes saying we're worthy because we're living by the law, and then you got this sinner knowing that he's not worthy. That's kind of where we're at. We're not worthy. And if you've got this thing in your mind that you've lived a good life and you're a good old boy and you do things and you give somebody a shirt off your back and you got it made because you're just a good old guy, that just goes to show that you think you've underestimated your sin. In other words, you don't realize that you're a sinner just like everybody else. You don't you don't do this, you don't do that. But when it really comes down to it, you need to realize your sins, or you need to realize that you're unworthy. You need to humble yourself and have the mentality of this guy. He sends his friends out there to Jesus because he don't even feel worthy to stand in front of Jesus. Verse 7, wherefore neither thought I myself worthy to come unto thee, but say in a word of my servant shall be healed. This is how much faith he's got, and he's fixing to explain why he's got this kind of faith. He says, I know that I don't even have to be there. All I got to do is send a servant out there and say, I've got enough faith in you that all you got to do is say the word from where you're at, not even close to my house. And the reason he didn't want him to come into his house is because the religion. He knows that the Jews can't come into his house because he's a Gentile. So he said, I'm not even going to try to stress you out by trying to get you into my house. I know that you can do it if you just say it. And this is why. Verse 8, for I also am a man set under authority, having under me soldiers, and I say unto one, go, and he goes, or goeth. And to another, come, and he cometh. And to my servant, do this, and he does do it. Okay, so this is why he knows that Jesus can heal him. He says, I'm under authority. I work for Caesar, and I know when things are supposed to be done. I could say, do it, and they know that they're going to get in trouble for it. Or they know that there's going to be consequences if you don't. I have authority, is what he's saying. If I speak it, it happens. And just like you come under the authority of God, and when you speak it, it happens. And I understand that. And that's what he's saying. I know who you are, and I know you have the authority to do these things. And I'm not worthy of being in front of you. And verse 9, when Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him and turned him about and said unto the people that followed him, I say unto you, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. He said in all of Israel, he's sitting there talking to the guys, the centurion friends that come out to him. And when Jesus goes somewhere, he's got a crowd with him. He don't just have the 12. There's a crowd following him. And he goes out there and he says, he hears what the centurion says to him, and I'm sure it was loud enough for the crowd behind him to hear it. And he turns around and he says, in all of Israel, I've never seen anybody with this much faith. And when's the last time one of y'all made God marvel? It says he marveled. And that's in awe. I know I can look at Lily doing something and I marvel, and it's kind of a different way, because I'm like, why in the world would anybody do that? And I'm sure I made God marvel at that in that kind of way several times, but never in amazement of like me doing something good. I was like, he's probably looking at me, he's like, why in the world is he doing that? And only 2 times in the Bible that Jesus marveled. It was right here. He marveled at the centurion. And he marveled when he come back and preached into Jerusalem. And none of the people, it says he marveled because none of the people were accepting him. I'm putting this into my words. I don't remember exactly how it was wrote, but there's only 2 times that he marveled. So, making God marvel is, wow, it's noteworthy. So not in all of Israel have I seen that kind of faith. Did you know if you had some faith like that, what kind of things would be happening?
We could move mountains.
We can move mountains with that kind of faith. It's ridiculous. I read this thing one time. It says the only thing that limits an unlimitless God is your faith. So I think that's kind of neat, and that's kind of proof right there. Verse 10, and they that were sent, returning to the house, found the servant whole that had been sick. Wow. That's awesome. And we're getting these stories. I don't know if we're going to get far enough, but we're getting these stories because these stories are going to explain something later. And this is going to start into another story. And it came to pass the day after that he went into a city called Nain. And many of his disciples went with him, and much people. So you got a crowd, and from this place to this place in Nain was about 25 miles. So just think of a day's journey walking in the sand, and you know, you're walking, and it's probably late in the evening by this time. You know, 25 miles is a ways. So a day's journey. They've been walking from there to there. 12, now when he came nigh to the gate of the city, behold, there was a dead man carried out, an only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And much people of the city was with her. So back in these days, when somebody died, they would hire mourners to go out in front of them, and they would be hooting and hollering and crying, and there would be a crowd of people walk them out to wherever the tomb or the temple was, and they would have been in a big wicker coffin-ish thing. It would have been, they would have got rid of the body quick because they didn't really embalm people. They would go and take them to wherever they were going to lay them in a tomb or whatever, and put them into this box that would permit or would promote decay and, you know, get rid of the thing. It would be called, I forget what it's called, but anyway, a year, 9 months, year, however long, they would go back and they would get the bones of this person and put them in an ossuary, a bone box. That way they could keep Aunt Melinda in the closet or whatever at home, and that way the tomb can be reused. You know what I'm saying? It was a bone box. The bones were sacred. Even in the Old Testament, you see people going and getting the bones of others. So they would keep the bones at home, and they would have more room in the tomb for the next person.
We do that nowadays.
And that's that would be like the family tomb, okay? So they're on their way to the tomb. Got dead little guy up on this little thing, and it would have been like a wicker basket kind of a deal, and they would have been toting him like Usher and pallbearer type thing. So you got this big crowd coming out of the gate, coming out of the city, big crowd coming into the city, big crowd happy and with Jesus and being all happy and glee, and all these people crying coming out. And it's a first. We'll get a little further. All right, verse 12. Now when he came nigh to the gate of the city, behold, I'm sorry. Yeah.
13.
Wept not.
Oh, I didn't get done explaining everything. So the woman, I'm sorry, y'all. So the woman was a widow, for one. That means she didn't have a husband, and that was her only son. In this religion, or in this era, when a woman was widowed, it was the son's responsibility to take care of the woman. Okay, so her only son just died, so she's weeping and sorrowful and probably wondering what is she going to do, because she ain't got nobody to take care of her. It wasn't like it is now. You can't just go and get a job and be able to take care of yourself. You would just be without, pretty much, if you didn't have family to take care of you. And I'm trying to make sure I hit all the topics. Okay, and 13, and when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her and said unto her, weep not. So, here's the ticket. When somebody is crying, like when Lily has a meltdown, stop crying, Lily. You can't force a feeling. Okay, you can't do it. You can't just, then she goes, I'm trying to, you know? That's what she does. You can't just say stop crying, especially if something as bad as your only son dying. Stop crying, stop crying. You can't say stop crying unless you're able to fix the problem, okay? Jesus tells us this woman to quit crying and her son's being carried out to be put in a tomb.
Don't you supposed to rejoice at a death and
But in
cry at a person? Because
Yeah,
but we know that if we know how that person lives, so if they're not going to heaven, it's hard. Or if you think they ain't,
yeah.
it's hard on you. to
It's
not
still
think.
hard. Man, it's so hard losing somebody.
It is hard.
Man, it really sucks to lose somebody. And especially not knowing, it's
Yes.
even worse. God's plan was not for us to come here to die. It was life. It was the sin in the garden that permitted the death. So we are only living to die because of the sin. We don't have that tree of life anymore. But there will be a day
Oh, yeah.
when we will put down this body and pick up a glorified body. Come get me up here. Get on. Come on. Okay, so she's weeping. He says, don't, weep not. Quit crying. 14, and he came and touched the bier. That's the casket or the little thing that he's in. And they that bear him stood still. So they're walking, carrying him, and he reaches up and touches what I'm calling a wicker basket, a bier, whatever you want to call it. And he says, young man, I say unto thee, arise. And he that was dead sat up and began to speak. And I really wished it would say what he was saying. And he delivered him to his mother.
Wow.
He reaches up just with a touch and says, get up. And he sits right up. And you're gonna see how the people deal with it. But just think about it. If you're somewhere and a dead dude just rises up.
He may not have been dead.
16, and there came a fear on all, and they glorified God, saying that a great prophet is risen up among us, and he that God hath visited his people. That's a totally normal response. Fear on all. Because you're not only dealing with the dead guy that's alive now, but you're dealing with the guy that woke him up. Okay, so that's holy smokes, that'd be gone. Buddy'd be sitting on the ground if I was carrying him. But you see the people's response. They say God has visited his people, and they were God's people, the Jews were. And this rumor, so that's 17, of him went forth throughout all Judea and throughout all the region round about. And it's important that you hear that this rumor goes out, because you're going to see right here in the next thing. Jesus is getting a pretty big fan club going on, and he's raising the dead, and he's healing the sick, and he's making blind people see, and he's doing all this stuff. So we're going to move on to verse 18, and it kind of shifts gears a little bit. And the disciple of John showed him of all these things. And John, calling unto him 2 of his disciples, sent them to Jesus, saying, Art thou he that should come, or look we for another? You know, John was John the Baptizer, John the Baptist, whatever you're going to call him. He is the one that baptized Jesus. He is the one that says, this is the man that comes as a lamb. And he says, I'm not even unworthy to unlatch him in his shoes or what, his sandals. And he also was the man that baptized Jesus and heard the voice of God saying, this is my son that I am well pleased. So this same John is in jail. It don't say this, but he's in jail. And I did know the name of this place, but I can't remember it. It's really irrelevant, but you got to know that he's in jail. And his faith is wavering because he was supposed to be pointing to the one that's going to come and rule and reign and breathe out judgment and do all this stuff from Isaiah 61, okay? But remember when he read Isaiah 61 a few weeks ago in the synagogue, he didn't get that far. He's got two comings, and he's seen the coming, and he was good enough to point to the man. He knew who it was. But John's sitting in a dungeon right now, and he's fixing to have his head cut off, and he's saying, where is he? Why ain't he fixing stuff yet? And his faith is wavering. And I mean, how often does that happen to us? I become a Christian, and now I have this problem, or now I'm fixing to lose my house, or my wife's cheating on me, or I'm fixing to die, or I done went all this way, and your faith gets a little wavering. Just know when that happens that it's totally normal. You see John the Baptist, faith is wavering. And he's seen this stuff, and the faith is on edge. He's like, are you the one, or we need to be looking for another guy? Because I'm pretty sure you're the one. I even leaped in my mom's womb when you got close to me, you know. I heard God talking to you. I kind of feel like you're the one, but are you the one? Because I'm still in jail, dude. What's up? Are we getting the ball going, or what? So that's where John's coming from, okay? 20, when the men were come unto him, they said, John Baptist hath sent us unto thee, saying, Art thou he that should come, or look we for another? And in that same hour he cured many of their infirmities and plagues and of evil spirits, and unto many that were blind he gave sight. So all the stuff that just happened, I was looking at something because I had it wrote down on here, but I don't have it wrote down on here. All this stuff that just happened is what the Messiah is supposed to be doing in Isaiah 35. And his answer in a minute is going to be leading back to Isaiah 35, which is going to give him comfort. But I'm doing all these things, and that was what the prophecy was. And we may even go back and read it because we're getting close to being out of time, and we're nowhere close to the end of the chapter. So
That's all right.
22, then Jesus answering said unto them, Go your way and tell John what things you have seen and heard. How that the blind see and the lame walk, that the lepers are cleansed and the deaf hear, that dead are raised, to the poor the gospel is preached. 23, and blessed is he whosoever shall not be offended in me. 24, and the message and the messengers of John were departed and began to speak unto the people concerning John. Okay, I'm not going to finish. Yeah, I will. What went ye out into the wilderness for to see? A reed shaken, or the wind, or with the wind? And I got to explain that. But he told the messengers of John to go back and tell them everything you've seen. Tell them that I've healed the sick, and made the blind to see and raised up the dead folks, and I've done all this stuff. And that would have been enough for John to say, you know what, that's what I'm looking for. That's, if he's able to do that, he's able to do the other stuff. I understand clearly now, because if you go back and read Isaiah 35, and that was where, that's where all of his background came from. That's the John the Baptist. That's where that's his favorite scripture. That's where he's at. He knew it well. So that's all the stuff about the Messiah coming. And just having that information would have put him at rest, saying, you know what? He's who he says he is. All I got to do is trust in him. Whether he comes and saves me or not, it's irrelevant. It's being done, and the kingdom's being fulfilled. So, John knew that he was going to be part of the kingdom. So he told them to go see what they've done, and then I hate the way that it branches off, because it is important to kind of split it. So what he done, the people that were come to messengers departed. They're gone. They're fixing to not hear the best part about what John is, and John ain't never gonna hear this. And it's kind of makes me sad a little bit, because John didn't ever hear this part. But he started speaking to the people that was following him about what he just said to John. And he began to speak unto the people concerning John. What went ye out into the wilderness for to see? A reed shaken in the wind. And this simply means, are you going out into the wilderness to see John because he's a politician? He can just make everybody happy and just go with the flow. And that's what it means. You didn't go out there to see John because he was just like everybody else. He don't just try to make everybody happy. 25, but what went ye out for to see? ? A man clothed in soft raiment. Behold, they which are gorgeously apparelled and live in delicately are in king's courts. So they're saying you didn't go out into king's courts to see some fancy, smancy, a celebrity. You're not going to see a king. You didn't go out there to see a celebrity. You didn't go out there to see a politician trying to make everybody happy. You went out there to see, let's keep reading. But what went ye out for to see? A prophet? Yeah, I say unto thee, are you, and much more than a prophet. This is he whom it is written, behold, I send my messenger before thy face, which shall prepare the way before thee. And what he's saying is, if you remember a few chapters ago, John the Baptist is a fiery preacher. He will tell you how it is. He had the people that come up and said, you brood of vipers. God's going to clean his threshing floor and tossing the chaff up to burn and all this stuff. That was not a good sermon. That ain't trying to tickle anybody's ears. You didn't go out to see somebody that was going to try to tickle your ears. You were going out to see a prophet. And you were going out to see this man because he is the one pointing to me. He's the one that was to prepare the way. That was the same thing that Michael told John the Baptist's dad when he said, you know what, you're having a son. He's going to prepare the way, straight the way he's going to be a herald for the prophet, for the Messiah, and that's who you went to see. For I say unto you, among those that are born of women, there is no greater prophet than John the Baptist. But he that has least in the kingdom of God is greater than he. So let me see if we can get through this and I can explain it to you. John's little messenger guys just left, and they didn't get to hear Jesus say that he was the greatest prophet. There was no prophet greater than him. But it says right here that the least in the kingdom of God is greater than he. And we are part of the kingdom, and you got to know that you're the least of the kingdom. But when we think about the great, great people, we think about somebody that's wrote a book, or somebody that's like a superstar. It ain't the same thing. What was great about John the Baptist is he could point his finger at the man that is supposed to be the Messiah. He didn't have all the details. He didn't have the New and Old Testament. He could just point his finger. He said, I know this man is the man. He's the one. He's the one we're looking for. But how much greater are we that we have all the details and we know all the things about Jesus, and we're to proclaim the name of Jesus, and we can explain it to a T. He couldn't do that. But, out of all the prophets, he was the one that could point that finger and say, that's the one. None of the prophets were able to do that. That's why John was the greatest prophet. He said, that's the man. I don't know all the details. I only seen it from afar away, and I can point at him and know. But how greater are we? And that's the thing. We're not greater morally. I'm pretty sure none of us even bear a candle to how John lived. He lived out in the wilderness. He wore a skin over him, an animal skin over him, and he ate honey and locusts. And he did not sin. He was a good dude. None of us are greater than him in the sense that we have him greater now. The only thing greater about us is that we know who Jesus is. We know all about him, and we are able to lead people to him in a way that John was not able to. He led them to him, but he didn't know all the details. He just said, he must increase and I must decrease. He had that down, which a lot of us don't have that down. He got to increase, we got to decrease. We got to pick up our cross. We got to die to the flesh. Ain't that right, Richard? That's the fourth cross.
That died to the flesh and walk on in the Holy Spirit.
That's right.
Pray it.
And this is verse 29, and all the people that heard him and the publicans justified God, being baptized with the baptism of John. And this is all the people that were baptized by John going, yeah, nodding their head, yeah, I was baptized by John, yeah, woo, he's the greatest prophet. But the Pharisees and lawyers rejected the counsel of God against themselves, being not baptized of him. And that just goes to, that's the way they are. They reject everything. What big deal? Dude, I don't have to be baptized by John.
They were still under the law instead of under the.
Yeah, they were under that law. And the Lord said, whereunto then shall I liken the men? Man, this is really crazy. Whereunto then shall I liken the men of this generation, and to what are they like? He's saying the people of this generation, what are they like? You got one group saying, I've been baptized by John. Woo-hoo. And then you got the other one saying, John ain't nothing. I don't want to baptize by him anyway. I got this, I do this. And he's saying, what is this generation like? That's Jesus saying, what are this generation like in front of everybody? They are like unto children sitting in the marketplace, and calling one to another, and saying, we have piped unto you, and ye have not danced. We have mourned to you, and ye have not wept. And this is, have you ever watched kids how they play? These are like children playing, and if you ever notice kids, they'll play doctor, or they'll play dress up, or they'll get in your clothes and the closet and be packing their stuff to go on a trip. They'll be just doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And then these people are like children playing a game of being married. The piping, this is a big celebration. We're getting married. We're piping. You ain't dancing while I'm playing the pipe. Why ain't you dancing? Or playing funeral. This is the other one. This is, we have mourned to you and you ain't wept. We're over here playing like we're dead, but you're not weeping. You know what I'm saying? This is like kids playing a game. That's how y'all are, a bunch of bratty kids. That's what Jesus is telling them.
Tell me childish.
And this is why, 33, for John the Baptist came neither eating bread nor drinking wine, and you say he had a devil. He come in and you're telling him he's crazy because he's eating bugs and wearing a dead sheep on his back or whatever. You call him crazy, but the Son of Man, 34, the Son of Man is come eating, drinking, and you say, behold, a gluttonous man and a winebibber, a friend of publicans and sinners. But okay, so you saying I'm all like trying to make everybody happy. This is Jesus going, he ate with Matthew, which was a tax collector, and you remember the tax collector's ball would have had, prostitutes and men after the prostitutes, and there would have been a bunch of drunk people there. Just because there are drunk people there don't mean Jesus is drinking. But all these people are saying, hey, Jesus is a drunkard, gluttonous man every time. And this is funny because every time there is a meal or somebody invites Jesus over to eat, he goes. Jesus likes eating.
About like us.
Man, he is at a meal. If there's a meal to be had, he is going, buddy. Every time you see him, he's eating. So,
That's a Baptist thing.
he's a gluttonous man. He's a winebibber, a friend of publicans, a friend of sinners. They're either on, they're rejecting everybody. And it says right here, 35, but wisdom is justified of all her children. That means the proof is in the pudding. If you are wise, you're not going to be like a little child making fun of whatever it is or rejecting. But if you are wise, you're going to be following Jesus. You're going to be in part of that crowd, and that's all he's saying right there. If you're going to be a child of wisdom, you're going to look like a wise person. But if you are not going to be wise, your fruit's going to show. In other words, you're going to be known by how you present yourself. The proof's in the pudding. That's the best way to put it. 36, and one of the Pharisees desired him that he would eat with him. Okay, so one of the Pharisees, and you got to think this is a guy of the law. And why would he want him to come eat with him? Why would a Pharisee want Jesus to come and eat with him? Just to put a few thoughts in your head. Either because Jesus is famous and he wants to look good, or he wants to set Jesus up in a trap, or he really is like curious. There could be many reasons that you want to invite Jesus over, especially if you're a Pharisee. So, how far did I get in that? And he went into the Pharisee's house and sat down to meat. That means eat, not meat, like meat, M-E-E-T, but it's M-E-A-T. That's eating food. 37, and behold, a woman in the city that Jesus sat at meat. I skipped some stuff. My dyslexia just kicked in. Where am I at? And behold, a woman of the city which was a sinner, when she knew that Jesus sat at meat in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster box of ointment. Okay, so here's the question. Here's the question of the month, the week, the year. How did this sinner woman, and we can all just, this woman's probably been around the block. That's probably what it is. How did sinner woman be in Pharisee's house? This is how it probably went down. In these days, Pharisee would have had a courtyard in his backyard, and that's where they would have ate. And that would have been facing the road. And Jesus got people following him, and there would have been a crowd trying to look through the cracks, seeing what Jesus is doing. So said woman's trying to see what Jesus is doing. But if you put everything in chronological order and all of the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, if you put them in order, Jesus had just got done saying, come to me, all you heavy laden, and the rest of the verse. I can't remember exactly. My my yoke is
Easy.
easy.
Like-
Like, yeah, something like that. I can't quote it. I'm not a quoter. I can just remember things. But could you imagine being a sinful woman in that kind of place and people just always bashing you and hearing a man say that? So she is looking for Jesus, okay? And I'm just putting everything in order because it makes more sense that way. So, said Pharisee, I guess, lets her in, and no better situation do you have than having a man of the law and a sinner that is just a flat out just sinner and realizes she's a sinner and needs Jesus. And she brought out an alabaster box. Alabaster is like a stone looking stuff, and it would have been like an opaque color. It was a box and it had ointment in it. And stood at his feet behind him, weeping, and began to wash his feet with tears. And did wipe them with her hairs of her head, and kiss his feet. And anointed them with the ointment. That's my dyslexia kicking in again. Okay, so how is she at Jesus' feet if they're sitting at a table eating? Okay, they're not sitting at a table. This is unrealistic. There's a thing called a triclinium. I've talked about it in the book of John at the First Supper, or at the Last Supper, I'm sorry. They would have been sitting down, leaning over to one side so they could eat with their right hand. So they would have been like sitting like this. So his feet would have been behind him. And she come up behind him and started washing his feet with her tears and wiping ointment on him. And here's the ticket. When you go into somebody's house, the servant's supposed to help you get your shoes off, wash your feet so you don't track dirt through the house because your feet are all dirty, wipe some olive oil on your head because it's like 10,000 degrees over in the Middle East and it's cooking you, and like get you all dolled up and while you're there. And this is what he's finna say. You know, the ladies kissing his feet, wiping his feet, and all this stuff. 39. Now when the Pharisee which had bidden him saw all that stuff going on, he spake within himself, saying, this man, if he were a prophet, would have known who and what manner of woman this is that toucheth him, for she is a sinner. You know, he's thinking in his head, if he really was a prophet, he would no way in the world let this sinful woman touch him like she's doing. Does that make sense? 40, and Jesus answered, saying unto him, Simon, how would you like to think something and somebody answer your question? He says, Simon, I have somewhat to say unto thee. And he said, Master, say on. If I was just thinking this, and he goes, I got something to say to you, I'd be like, okay. 41, there was a certain creditor who had two debtors, and one owed 500 pence, and the other 50. And when they had nothing to pay, he frankly forgave both of them. Tell me, therefore, which of them would love him most? So, a debtor. A man had done let two guys borrow money. One has 5 months worth of debt accumulated, 5 days worth of days worth of wages. The other one's got 50 months worth of days worth of wages. Think of 50 months worth of wages that this guy owes you. And he says, when it comes down to it, neither one of them got money, and the guy that loaned him money says, you know what, just keep the money. Which guy is going to be more grateful? The guy that owes him the 500 or the guy that owes him the 50? That's what he's saying. If you owed somebody $5,000 and somebody said, just keep it, don't worry about it, when you went to go pay him back, wouldn't you be more grateful than somebody that owed him $50 or $500? You see the difference. You see what's going on here.
But it depends.
Quit. So you see what's going on here, the picture that's painted. This guy got forgiven this amount, and this guy got forgiven this amount. And Simon answered us and said, I suppose that to whom he forgave the most. And he said unto him, Thou hast rightly judged. He goes, you answered that correctly. You know, the one that owes the most that's been forgiven is going to be the one that's, you know, the most thankful. 44, and he turned to the woman and said unto Simon, Seest thou this woman? I entered into thine house, I come into your house. Thou gavest me no water for my feet, but she has washed my feet with tears, and wiped them with her hairs of her head. Thou gavest me no kiss. That was one of the things, they greet you with a kiss. That, you know, you didn't greet me with a kiss, the holy kiss or whatever it is. Man, I lost my spot.
45.
44. I mean,
45.
And I came in and not cease to kiss my feet. I'm sorry, I missed some of that. But this woman, since the time I came in, has not ceased to kiss my feet. You didn't give me a kiss, but ever since I've been here, this woman's been kissing my feet. My head with oil thou didst not anoint, but this woman hath anointed my feet with ointment. Wherefore I say unto thee, her sins, which are many, are forgiven. For she loveth much, but to whom little is forgiven, the same loveth little. And he said unto her, Thy sins are forgiven. So, the moral of that story, man, it speaks for itself. And I think that's what gives me the drive to do what I do, because I come so short, and I realize how short I come. And all the years of saying not believing in God, I'm trying my best to make up for it. I'm trying to kiss Jesus' feet, okay? I don't know how good I'm doing, but I try, I fail daily, but we'll just keep going the other two verses because we're over. And they that sat at meat with him began to say within themselves, Who is this that forgiveth sin also? And he said to the woman, Thy faith has saved thee, go in peace. That's a question everybody's got to ask. Who is Jesus to you? Because these people said, Who is this man that forgiveth sin? We did make it all the way through, didn't we?
It's no rat race.
So that just goes to show you have not messed up too much for Jesus to be able to forgive you. But it also goes to show if you think you don't need forgiving, that you ain't, you know what? You don't think you deserve it, you ain't gonna get it. It's called grace. There ain't nothing you can do to get it, but you get it when you don't think you deserve it. And that's how it's been going the whole time.